Welcome to Revive Nature, where forgotten things find new purpose. This video is packed with creative DIY trash garden ideas, turning waste into wonders for your front yard, patio, or tiny backyard. We've added timestamps so you can jump straight to what inspires you. Got questions or ideas? Drop them in the comments. And if something here moves you, don't just watch. Make it your own. Maybe to you, I'm just another voice online. But behind this screen is a real story. A real family. This isn't just content, it's hope wrapped in creativity. Every like, every comment, every subscribe keeps that hope alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing us. In a small corner of the backyard, where sunlight danced softly through the lace of grapevine leaves, something magical had quietly bloomed. No, it wasn't the flower beds this time, though the marigolds and chrysanthemums were certainly doing their part. It was the unexpected charm of Coca-Cola bottles. Yes, those once forgotten containers of fizz and celebration, now reborn as a border of joy. Each bottle had been carefully washed, the labels soaked off in a basin of warm water and mild soap. Then, like painting on stories, they were transformed with gentle brush strokes, petals of red, dots of white, and swirls of pink. Some stood tall, half buried in soft earth, others were cut and shaped into blooms themselves, as if yearning to be part of the garden they guarded. The fence they formed was not about keeping anything out, it was an invitation. A soft guide along the flower trail that curved around a small bamboo pergola, where ivy curled and laughed in the breeze. Here, one could sit and listen to the bees hum, the birds chirp, and feel the quiet presence of creativity stitched into every corner of the soil. Children who wandered through would ask, "Are those real flowers?" And the answer would always be, "Not quite. But they bloom just the same in spirit." The bottles caught the light just right, glowing like rubies under the golden sun, while the perennial blooms swayed beside them like lifelong friends. What once was trash had become a treasure, not because it mimicked nature, but because it celebrated the imagination that turns waste into wonder. In this garden, nothing was forgotten. Not the flowers, not the joy, and certainly not the beauty of a bottle given a second life. There's something delightfully unexpected about turning a stone into a story. Nestled between the roots of marigolds and tucked alongside clumps of asters, a parade of painted creatures marches along the garden path. Not real animals, but stones lovingly transformed by human hands. Each one tells its own tale: a red-shelled ladybug poised for flight, a green turtle resting mid-stride, a cheerful bee buzzing quietly in stillness. No two are alike, and yet they all belong, a joyful assembly of color and shape that invites smiles from even the weariest garden visitor. The rocks were gathered from riverbeds and forgotten corners, some smooth as eggs, others rough like bark. They were washed clean, dried in the sun, then given new life with paints and patience. The artists, perhaps children, perhaps grown-ups chasing whimsy, adorned them with playful faces, bright wings, sleepy smiles. Some rocks wore tiny hats, others bore stripes or flower crowns. And when the paint dried, the real magic happened. They became part of the garden. Not as clutter, but as companions. The critter parade winds gently through lavender bushes and beneath the watchful leaves of Japanese anemones. The garden path no longer feels plain. It giggles with surprises, invites you to pause and bend closer. Look, that ladybug seems to be laughing. That owl might just wink if the wind hits right. It's a dance of color against the backdrop of green and bloom. The kind of art that doesn't need a frame, only a little space in the soil. In this little corner of the world, even a rock can smile. Even a stone can bloom, not with petals, but with personality. And those who walk here, the children, the curious, the creative, know that beauty isn't just grown. Sometimes, it's painted. Sometimes, it marches right beside your marigolds, on stubby little feet that don't move, but somehow lead the way. In a quiet corner of the garden, where shoes are left at the door and time slows to the pace of falling petals, a humble Kendi rests. It leans gently, as if whispering a secret into a waiting basin below. From its spout, a thin stream of water flows, steady and soft. Not loud like a fountain, not boastful like a sculpture. Just a quiet breath, as if the earth itself is exhaling. The jug, once forgotten in the back of an old kitchen, has been reborn. Its terracotta skin now carries stories in swirls of hand-painted flowers, its surface burnished by age, not neglect. It doesn't need to shout to be noticed. Its beauty lies in the way it belongs, so naturally nestled among mossy stones and chrysanthemums that bloom like soft bursts of gold and red. A small bamboo fence embraces the scene, framing it like a painting. Above, grapevine leaves rustle with each gentle wind, casting moving shadows across the stone. And somewhere nearby, a butterfly lingers too long, caught in the spell of moving water and autumn air. Here, people sit and forget their phones. They trace the sound of dripping water with closed eyes, feel the cool stone under bare feet, breathe in the scent of wet clay and blooming mums. A candy becomes more than an object, it becomes a presence. It reminds us of what we overlook. That beauty doesn't need to be bought. That art can rise from the ashes of the everyday. That even an old clay jug, once used and abandoned, can return as a bearer of calm. This is no grand fountain for palaces. This is a whisper for patios, a lullaby for backyards. A space for breath, for stillness, for small joys in tiny gardens. Sometimes, a garden speaks not in rows or symmetry, but in stories that dangle from the sky. Beneath the gentle shelter of a handmade pergola, chairs once destined for the landfill now float in midair. They do not wait to be sat on. Instead, they bloom. Each one carries its own history. Maybe a dining chair from a grandmother's table, maybe a rickety thing found curbside on a quiet Sunday. Sanded, painted, and strung from the pergola beams, they now hang upside down, suspended in time and function. Their seats, no longer for sitting, have become cradles for soil, roots, and trailing blossoms. Marigolds tumble over the edges like laughter. Sedum autumn joy finds new ground in a suspended frame. Japanese anemones sway softly with the afternoon breeze, petals catching the sun like tiny sails. From below, the chairs look like chandeliers of nature, whimsical, nostalgic, and boldly alive. They dance in the wind, their shadows flickering on the cobblestone path like garden spirits passing through. Beneath them, a quiet bench waits. It's not the centerpiece, the floating chairs have claimed that role, but it welcomes onlookers to pause and look up. To wonder. To smile at how unexpected beauty can be. The air smells of old wood and fresh blossoms. Somewhere, a bee hums approval. And in this modest corner of a small backyard, a story unfolds, of things once forgotten, now reborn. Not as what they were, but as what they never knew they could be. A floating chair doesn't just save space. It saves memory. It tells us that even the most worn, broken object can be part of something magical, with only a little string, a little soil, and a vision that dares to look up. A garden, no matter how small, deserves a grand entrance. And sometimes, the most enchanting arches aren't carved from stone or wrought from iron, but shaped from yesterday's empties and today's dreams. The rainbow bottle archway stands proudly over a narrow garden gate, not to divide, but to welcome. Its bottles, once tossed aside and bound for the bin, now gleam like gems in the sunlight. Reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, and purples, each bottle painted with intention, strung with care, and kissed by sunlight. Together, they form a living prism that scatters joy across the path below. It's the kind of thing that stops people mid-step. A neighbor walking past might turn and smile. A child might gasp, thinking it's a portal to another world. And perhaps, in its own quiet way, it is. The arch doesn't just stand there, it sings with color. As the wind dances through the bottles, they clink gently like wind chimes. Light bounces off their curves, casting colored shadows on the chrysanthemums blooming at their base. Bees drift lazily between marigold petals, unaware they've been invited into an art gallery made of trash and imagination. Underneath the arch, the world feels different. A little softer. A little more alive. It's not just a structure, it's a reminder. Beauty doesn't need a big budget. Wonder doesn't come from perfection. Sometimes, it's built from what others throw away. From the ordinary, made extraordinary with a brush stroke and a vision. And so, this bottle arch stands as a gatekeeper to the magic beyond, to secret seating corners, late afternoon tea under a pergola, flowers that bloom long into the fall. It marks the line between what was forgotten and what is now celebrated. Walk beneath it and you'll understand, a garden doesn't start with soil. It starts with soul. There's a quiet rhythm that lives in gardens, a spiral of life, movement, and return. And here, in the simplest of backyards, that rhythm takes shape not with expensive bricks or designer curves, but with the humble clarity of water bottles. Set into the earth with care, the bottles weave a spiral around a bed of blooming chrysanthemums, wrapping the flowers in a gentle embrace. Each bottle glistens, whether from morning dew or the last light of sunset, catching reflections of orange petals and green leaves in its translucent skin. They're not just bottles now. They're whispers of pattern, of intention. Once tossed aside, they've been cleaned, painted, and positioned, each cap aligned like the dot in a musical note. Some bottles glow from within thanks to small solar lights tucked inside, giving the spiral an ethereal shimmer as the day fades. Others reflect the sun in soft hues of lavender, mint, and sky blue, tones chosen not for attention, but for harmony. This spiral edging doesn't merely contain the garden, it guides the eye. It leads visitors inward, as if into a story. At its heart, a planter overflows with Japanese anemones that spill over like a fountain of petals. Bees come, rest, then drift away. The air hums gently with late summer life. Children skip along the spiral's edge, tracing it with a finger or the tip of a stick. Grown-ups smile as they pass, perhaps not noticing the bottles at first, only the feeling they give, of care taken, of beauty reclaimed. And when evening comes, and the lights inside the bottles begin to glow, the spiral becomes something more. A constellation on earth. A soft-spoken celebration of second chances. In this tiny garden, where space is precious and waste is transformed, even a plastic bottle can become part of something poetic. The spiral whispers not of trash, but of turning what was thrown away into something that turns heads, turns hearts, and returns again and again to the idea. Beauty can begin anywhere. In a quiet garden corner, where the breeze is gentle and the soil holds stories, a butterfly has landed, not on a flower, but on the earth itself. Shaped by hand from dozens of small, smooth stones, this butterfly mosaic doesn't flutter away. It rests, forever in bloom, embedded in the heart of a humble backyard. Its wings are wide and symmetrical, crafted from pieces that once seemed too plain to matter: gray pebbles from a riverside walk, terracotta chips from a broken pot, glass beads saved from forgotten crafts. Each piece has a purpose now, and together, they form something bigger, something gentle. The wings stretch across the garden bed like a memory caught mid-motion. Pale pinks and cool lavenders blend into golden ochres and soft whites. Every stone is placed with care, like a painter dotting their canvas, like a gardener planting intention instead of seeds. Around this mosaic, life thrives. Marigolds nod their golden heads. asters lean in. Bees and real butterflies, almost confused, hover nearby as if greeting a distant cousin made of stone. It's not just a decoration. It's a declaration. A tribute to transformation, not just of the stone into art, but of waste into meaning. For each pebble was chosen, each color considered. The result is not loud, but it lingers in the mind like a song with no words. Visitors pause, bending slightly to take it in. Children trace the outline with their fingers. Gardeners nod with quiet pride. The butterfly doesn't move, but it shifts something in those who look. This is what a garden does best, not just grow plants, but grow wonder. Here, on this patch of ground, art and earth embrace. The mosaic tells no story aloud, yet it speaks. Of patience. Of beauty hidden in the overlooked. Of stillness that flies. A butterfly in stone. And still, somehow, it soars. In the hush of morning, before the birds begin their concert and the world leans into noise, a garden breathes in stillness. At its edge, a boundary whispers rather than shouts, made not of store-bought bricks, but of bamboo and stone, and memories. Here lies a Zen border, not just in style, but in soul. The bamboo, weathered yet sturdy, was once discarded from an old fencing project. Cleaned and cut, it now stands tall and quiet, forming a rhythmic line like notes in a lullaby. Between the bamboo stand smooth river stones, their rounded shapes gathered one by one, telling of time and water and gentle polish. But look closer. There's more than just nature here. Tucked between the stones are accents of surprise, metal washers painted soft gray, copper fittings polished to a gentle glow, and screws once left to rust, now reborn as humble art. Junk, reimagined. Trash, elevated. They are the heartbeat of this silent space. Behind this border, asters nod softly. Japanese anemones bloom in muted pinks and whites, like sighs on stems. The air smells of damp earth and distant chrysanthemum. Nothing demands attention, yet everything holds it. There's no need for grand gestures. This garden invites only breath and thought, and the joy of having created something from almost nothing. To sit here is to remember that a border can do more than separate. It can connect, the old with the new, the forgotten with the celebrated. A cracked pipe becomes a lantern base. A rusted bolt becomes a totem. Bamboo cuttings frame a story once overlooked. And perhaps that's what beauty truly is, not perfection, but presence. In this tiny yard, with its modest path and hand-touched stones, serenity is handmade. The Zen border doesn't pretend to be flawless, it proudly shows its textures, its past, its transformation. And in doing so, it teaches something quietly profound. Nothing is wasted. Not the stone. Not the bamboo. Not the morning stillness. Not even a single piece of broken metal. In a garden that once struggled to find space for beauty, something unexpected now floats above, not birds or butterflies, but Coca-Cola bottles, reborn and blooming. Suspended by jute ropes from the beams of a backyard pergola, these familiar red label containers have shed their old identity. Their curves are now painted in cheerful tones, red softened to blush, whites warmed to ivory, and their mouths overflow with marigolds, asters, and cascading vines that dangle gently in the breeze. Each bottle, once discarded after a moment of refreshment, now carries something lasting. Life, growth, charm. They sway gently overhead, dancing with the wind, casting tiny shadows on the bench below where someone might sit with a book or a cup of tea. Chrysanthemums bloom beneath like a sea of silent applause, as if cheering on the bottles above for their second chance at meaning. It's a strange thing, perhaps, to find poetry in a plastic bottle. But here, among wooden beams and whispering vines, the transformation feels natural, as if the garden always knew how to make use of what others forgot. And it's not just about saving space or saving money. It's about turning function into fascination. About creating surprise where no one expects it. These bottle baskets don't pretend to be store-bought. They're proudly handmade. Visible brush strokes, uneven twine knots, paint that blushes in the sun. They are real. They are loved. Visitors who step into the garden often look up in wonder. Children ask if the bottles sing when it rains. Adults pause, smile, and sometimes whisper, "I could make that." And that's the beauty of it. This floating garden does more than grow flowers. It grows ideas. It tells a story of what happens when imagination meets everyday waste. Of how joy can dangle from a string, and bloom, and change the way we see the world. Or at least, the way we see what we throw away. So look up. There's a garden in the sky. Some chairs are no longer meant to be sat on. They've earned a different purpose, a softer role in the garden story. Along the fence of a quiet backyard, a row of old chairs stands proudly, not as furniture, but as frames for life. Each chair once served its duty in kitchens, parlors, porches, and now, they line the garden like sentinels of memory, gently reborn. Repainted in hues that echo the earth and sky, soft greens, pale blues, warm creams, the chairs hold no cushions. Instead, they cradle life. Succulents, thick with water and story, nestle into the hollowed seats. Hens and chicks burst outward like starbursts. Echeveria open like petals sculpted in stone. Sedum trails fall like sleepy vines, brushing against the stones below. This is no rigid border. It curves like a smile, a line of character and quirk that tells visitors, here, the garden has a sense of humor. A sense of style. A sense of history that blooms. Behind the chairs, chrysanthemums and anemones raise their blooms like colorful companions, complementing the textures with softness. The contrast, weathered wood against plump green succulents, pastel paint against golden blooms, is deliberate, yet feels effortless. Some of the chairs lean slightly, imperfect. And that's the charm. Perfection isn't the goal here. Presence is. They whisper stories, these chairs. Of birthdays, family dinners, dusty attics. Now, they're part of a new chapter, not forgotten, just reimagined. Gardeners who pass this line often pause. Not because it's grand, but because it's unexpected. Because it says, this place has heart. And perhaps, most wonderfully, it offers an idea anyone can carry home, that beauty can be built from what we already have. That something broken or outdated can bloom again, if only we give it purpose. In this rustic border, chairs don't ask to be used. They simply offer themselves, as vessels of green, of softness, of story. And the garden, ever grateful, grows around them. Some fences are meant to keep things in. Others, like this one, exist simply to make the world more beautiful. Along the edge of a tiny front yard, a wave of color rises, not from the flowers, though they certainly help, but from the fence itself. Made entirely of recycled plastic bottles, it dances with seascape tones, soft turquoise, seafoam green, coral pink, and the faded cream of beach-washed shells. Each bottle has been reshaped, cut, curled, and painted, its form now mimicking that of a blossom caught mid-bloom. Attached to a rustic wooden base, These floral shapes line up one after another like a string of sea garden pearls, welcoming every passerby with their playful, ocean-kissed charm. Behind them, real flowers play along. Chrysanthemums burst in warm golds and reds, Japanese anemones sway gently in the breeze, and the occasional butterfly floats through like a whisper of summer. The scene is cheerful, light, and just a little bit magical, like a backyard that remembers the sea. What once held soda now holds color, joy, and memory. It's hard to believe these bottle blossoms once waited on shelves, were emptied in haste, then discarded. Here, they've been given shape again, not just in form, but in feeling. They reflect the sun, catching light like water, casting soft shadows on gravel paths below. They hold no scent, but somehow carry the fragrance of creativity. And perhaps that's what makes them so beautiful. The fence doesn't just line a garden, it frames a story. One of transformation. Of hands willing to cut and paint. Of eyes that see not plastic, but possibility. Of gardens that embrace not just nature, but human imagination. Neighbors slow down as they pass. Children point. Guests smile before stepping inside. The fence doesn't speak, but it sings, a quiet melody of ocean breeze, warm hands, and the joy of making something lovely out of what was lost. This is not just recycling. This is renewal. A celebration of the sea, the garden, and everything in between. Not every marker needs a sign. Some simply stand, quiet, grounded, ancient in spirit, like the stacked stone totems that now line this humble garden path. Each one is a sculpture of balance. No glue, no nails. Just patience, gravity, and respect. They rise in layers, wide bases narrowing to graceful points, made from stones gathered on long walks and sunny afternoons. Smooth and cool to the touch, their colors are soft echoes of the earth, moss gray, soil brown, sand beige. Placed along the winding path, they don't lead the way, they suggest it. They don't shout, they whisper. A rhythm of stillness, a pulse in the silence. Between them bloom marigolds, their orange flames flickering in contrast to the calm of the stone. Chrysanthemums soften the space, their petals like layered thoughts. As you walk, you feel the invitation, slow down. Listen. Be. These totems are more than decoration. They are presents made visible. Symbols of care, of time spent outdoors, of hands steadying stones not for structure, but for beauty. They don't do anything. And that is their gift. Some stand tall and narrow. Others are squat, sturdy, quietly laughing at gravity. A few wear tiny caps of moss or hold fallen leaves like offerings. And every one feels alive, not in movement, but in meaning. At sunset, the light pools around their bases. At dawn, dew clings to their curves. In rain, they glisten like memory. Birds sometimes perch. Cats brush past. Children reach out to try, just once, to make their own. They are meditations. They are milestones. They are art without ego. And in this backyard, not grand, but full of soul, they turn a simple path into something sacred. A journey not through space, but feeling. Because sometimes, all you need to mark a meaningful moment is a single stone, and the intention to place it with love. In the hush beneath a weathered pergola, where vines cling and sunlight weaves through slats of wood, a quiet wonder unfolds, not in the trees or the wind, but in clay. Laid gently on their sides, like vessels once poured and then forgotten, the kendi now cradle flowers instead of water. Their curved bellies, once filled with cool relief, now hold soil, roots, and a touch of magic. From their mouths spill the blooms of fall, soft-petaled asters, golden marigolds, and the trailing blush of sedum autumn joy. Each jug rests not by accident, but by design. They lean against stone paths, tucked beneath benches or beside garden chairs. Some are painted, not loudly, but with faded florals or geometric whispers. Others bear their natural earthen tones, cracked slightly, worn by years, but never broken. And it is this quiet imperfection, that makes them belong. The garden does not ask the jugs to be new. It only asks them to hold, to nurture, to carry beauty in the hollows they once used for something else. Visitors pause when they notice. Some smile at the surprise, flowers blooming from jugs that lean as if they're tired but proud. Others kneel, reach out, touch the rough clay, feel the coolness beneath the sun. Children sometimes try to lift one, only to discover it is heavier than expected. Heavy with earth. Heavy with purpose. Beneath the pergola, time slows. The clay remembers being shaped by hand. The flowers know the rhythm of day and dusk. Together, they sing without sound. And so the candy, humble, curved, strong, become storytellers in the garden. They tell of usefulness reborn, of objects not discarded but transformed, of how, in the right place, even an old jug can be a cradle for life. This is not just decor. It is intention, a way of seeing what is already there, and letting it bloom. Not every chair is meant to be sat on. Some are meant to spark wonder. In a soft corner of a backyard, under the dappled light of climbing vines, stands a chair. Its legs are wobbly. Its paint is cracked. But it holds something far more precious than comfort, a world. Where once there was a seat, now there is moss, thick and springy, alive with texture. Pebbles form a winding path no wider than a finger. A thimble becomes a basin. A stick becomes a bridge. Bottle caps glisten like ponds. And tucked near the backrest, a tiny wooden door hints at visitors unseen. It is a fairy garden. But more than that, it is imagination made visible. The chair, once destined for the dump, now cradles this scene with quiet pride. Its frame leans slightly to one side, like an old storyteller deep in a tale. Around it, chrysanthemums and anemones bend close, as if listening. Bees hover. A breeze passes. Nothing moves, yet everything is alive. Children discover it first. They crouch, eyes wide, fingers itching to touch but too enchanted to disturb. Adults smile, remembering something soft inside themselves. Some bend to see. Others sit nearby, letting the magic settle like sun on their skin. This tiny world speaks of possibility, that with a little time and heart, something forgotten can become unforgettable. That even in the smallest garden, there is room for fantasy. That a chair can be more than a chair. It can be a gate to wonder. Built not with money, but with care. Assembled not for show, but for soul. And here, in this little patch of green, it proves what all great gardens whisper. Beauty is not always big. Magic is not always loud. Sometimes, they sit quietly in an old chair filled with moss and dreams. In a garden filled with petals and purpose, there rises a tower of things once forgotten, a sculpture that doesn't pretend to be perfect, but is perfectly itself. This is not marble. It is not bronze. It is art born of bolts and cans, broken tools and bottle caps. Junk, some might say. But here, in the golden light of a cottage garden, it becomes something more. Each piece was once discarded, a teapot too rusted to pour, a wrench too stiff to turn, a coffee can emptied long ago. Painted in vibrant hues, crimson, mustard, aqua, lavender, they stack like a chorus of colors, one on top of the other, defying expectation. Some are round, others sharp. Some whisper of kitchens, others of garages. And yet, they harmonize. At the base, flowers bloom like applause. Sedum reaches upward. Asters nod in approval. Marigolds flicker like laughter around its feet. Children gaze upward, pointing to the spoon or the strainer or the gear. Adults smile, then look again, longer this time. Wonder settles in like sunlight on shoulders. The sculpture doesn't move, but it stirs something. It tells a different story than the flowers. It speaks of reinvention, of resilience, of seeing not what something is, but what it could become. Its height isn't measured in inches, but in imagination. Made with no blueprint, only instinct. No manual, only memory. It stands because someone believed a pile of nothing could become a symbol of something, of joy, of wit, of wild creativity rooted in the earth. Birds perch atop its highest point. Rain trickles down its painted curves. Time may peel the colors, and yet the story deepens. It is a totem, not of gods or spirits, but of possibility. In this backyard, amid flowers and fences, a monument rises. Built not by stone, but by second chances. And it says to every gardener, every artist, every dreamer, the things you discard may one day stand tall, if only you dare to see their beauty first.